This is Rob Kilmer. There's been an awful lot of talk about bailouts in the last several months, and today we're going to shift from characterizing them to explaining them. That's this week on You Defend It. Welcome to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number to call into the show is 772-1290. As always, callers to the show will need to take a position, be able to defend it with an argument that is factual, not emotional. And if you can't make your point without insulting someone, you can't make your point on this show. Callers and guests will be treated with complete respect. For my part, I will ask questions that matter and give people the opportunity to answer. My website is www.youdefendit.com. That's youdefendit.com. You can give me your comments on the show anytime. By Friday of each week, I will have the topic up for the next show. You can also visit my blog through the site. You can read my posts and leave your own. The lineup for the Sunday talk shows will also be posted there on Saturdays if they are posted online by the Associated Press by then. They were not up as of 30 minutes ago. You can always listen to my show live on streaming audio on www.wmbf.com, and my show is then uploaded to youdefendit.com later on Saturdays. Finally, there is a new debate suggestions section on the website. It is at the top of the home page. You can leave me your thoughts on topics, debaters, and questions. And we will talk at the end of the show about the upcoming debate. Okay, I wanted to talk today about the bailouts. And I've been noticing, what we hear primarily about them is how they are characterized. And like we've done with other issues on this show, where we try and get behind all that and get some facts back out there for people to actually comment on, I thought it was important with this issue just to make some fundamental points and then get your reaction to them. I think there is actually an understanding out there amongst an alarmingly large segment of the public that this money was just given to these industries, just as a giveaway. And it went out in the form of loans. And in return, not only are they to be repaid, but in some cases we received, or the public received, ownership in certain companies, and that ownership can be bought out. So the objective in providing this money up front is that it will be paid back. And I'm not sure that that fundamental message is really getting out there. Now, there is a rich debate to be had over whether the government should be doing this in the first place. I understand that. However, the facts are what they are, and they should be included in the conversation as well. This shouldn't just simply be a philosophical conversation about socialism or nationalizing companies. I thought it would be important today to explain somewhat, in general terms, how these bailouts work in theory. I'm going to start with an article September 29, 2008 from 9msn.com. The title of the article is, "So How Will It Work?" And this is a quote from the article. The U.S. will finance the bailout via the financial markets. It will issue U.S. $700 billion in U.S. funds in U.S. Treasuries, and hopes to be able to sell the assets it is taking over back to the market once their value has increased, potentially at a tidy profit. That's the end of that segment of that article. So with respect to the Troubled Assets Program, the original intent there was to purchase some of these troubled assets and then sell them not keep them. And obviously, ideally, the government wishes to sell those at a profit and may ultimately sell those, whichever it ends up purchasing or has purchased, at a loss. But the principle behind this is to get these assets off the ledgers of these lending institutions and then try and make money off them, or at least break even. Again, I think there was this notion out there that we were just giving these lending institutions money, and that was that. That is not the case. In fact, what you're seeing with the auto bailouts is that we are insisting, or the Obama administration, this is their pitch, that the reason they are so involved in reshaping the auto industry is to ensure that the U.S. gets its money back. In other words, that the money that goes out to them is repaid when necessary changes are made to the industries themselves in order to make them profitable again, so that the money, again, can be repaid. The next one I have, this is from the New York Times, October 30th, 2008, and this involved AIG. I thought it would be worth very briefly going to discussing AIG, because there was an enormous amount of money spent there. The Fed extended the original $85 billion line of credit at a steep price. On the part of the loan that AIG draws down, it must pay an interest rate of 8.5% over a 3-month period, an index rate for interbank lending. That's the LIBOR. On the unused portion, AIG must pay a fixed rate of 8.5%. In addition, the Fed added a 2% commitment fee to the total balance when it started the loan. Okay, again, what went out to AIG, which I believe totaled approximately $170 billion, that is not a grant. That is a loan. And that is a loan at 8.5% interest, which is significantly higher than you would be buying your house at or refinancing right now. And on top of that, there's a 2% commitment fee. I don't mean to laugh at that, but are you kidding me? What were their options? A 2% commitment fee? I almost feel sorry for them. We tacked on an extra 2%. I think they were probably committed before that. I'm not sure they had a lot of other options. That just seems ridiculous to me, a 2% commitment fee. But hey, if it means more money back to the taxpayers, then I guess that's a good thing. I guess you want to make it hard and unusual that a major industry goes to the government for loans as opposed to a bank. But again, these are loans. These are not grants. So this notion that we are just simply underwriting companies by giving them cash without any expectation that the money be returned is not accurate. And I think that it is implicit in a lot of the conversations you hear. Why should we give these companies money? I mean, I've heard that 1,000 times. Why are we giving these people money? Well, the answer is we're not. We're loaning them money. Now, whether they pay it back, who knows? However, to characterize these bailouts as giveaways it's misleading. You know, there were loan documents signed. People became obligated to repay the money. In theory, and I stress that this is theoretical. This is not necessarily the way it's going to end up. But in theory, the government would make its money back literally with interest. We will see what happens. But this is a very emotionally charged issue because it touches on how we believe our fundamental economy is structured. In other words, how much are we going to let socialism encroach on capitalism? But let's remember, an 8.5% interest rate with a 2% commitment fee sounds a little bit more like capitalism than socialism. We'll be back. You are listening to You Defend It right here on News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number to call into the show is 772-1290. I did want to offer another aspect of this. The problem you have once you loan people money is that bankruptcy becomes less of an option. Now, we're going to get to Chrysler in a minute because they are the best example out there right now of what I'm talking about. But you probably asked yourself, I know I did, particularly with respect to the auto industry, why not just let these companies file bankruptcy like the airlines seem to do on a monthly basis? I feel like the airlines are always emerging from bankruptcy. Well, that's a little trickier now that we've loaned them money. Here's an article from May 6, 2009, from CNN. Chrysler, LLC, will not repay U.S. taxpayers more than $7 billion in bailout money it received earlier this year and as part of its bankruptcy filing. This revelation was buried within Chrysler's bankruptcy filings last week and confirmed by the Obama administration Tuesday. The filings included a list of business assumptions from one of the company's key financial advisors in the bankruptcy case. An Obama administration official confirmed Tuesday that Chrysler won't be repaying the loans, though a portion of the bridge loan may be recovered by Treasury from the assets of Chrysler Financial, the former credit arm of the automaker, which is essentially going out of business as part of the reorganization. Quote, the reality now is that the face value of the $4 billion bridge loan will be written off in the bankruptcy process, end quote, said the official, who added that the 8% equity stake that Treasury will be receiving as part of the company's reorganization is meant to compensate taxpayers for the lost money. The Canadian government also agreed to kick in about $900 million in bankruptcy financing. According to the filings, Chrysler's advisor assumes that this loan will be forgiven as well. Quote, I've known for some time that the capital structure of the company and the situation it was in, we would not be paid back, he said. There are several secured lenders ahead of us, and they're not getting most of their money, end quote. When you file bankruptcy, there's a list, there's an order. Okay, there are people whose claims take priority over other people's claims. Now, I cannot for the life of me figure out how the United States government did not finagle its way into the top spot with its loan guarantees, or by simply passing a law making a United States government loan the highest priority in bankruptcy. But in bankruptcy, when you go into bankruptcy, you have a list of preferred creditors. You have a list of priorities. People in certain positions get paid first. You know, people with secured debt. Then it goes down the line. I don't know how we did not end up further up the line, but that's the problem with bankruptcy once you commit to a bailout structure where you are giving loans. Then you're all in. You can't let them go to bankruptcy. I mean, if AIG were to file for bankruptcy, would we be out $170 billion? I don't know. I don't know what the particular arrangement is with AIG, but it looks possible based on how it went with Chrysler. And that's an important fact to have out there. Once these companies go into bankruptcy, the purpose of bankruptcy is to get protection from your creditors. Right now, one of Chrysler's creditors is the United States government. That being the case, we were vulnerable when Chrysler filed for bankruptcy, and we got bit. I mean, I understand that people are upset because they call this socialism and all that other stuff, and you know how I feel about characterizing things versus arguing the facts of them. But it is legitimate, and I have not heard this argued, to say, well, what now? With the companies that we have given money to, what if they file for bankruptcy? And the worst part is, they can emerge from bankruptcy still operating, no longer owing the money. That is an issue worth thinking about. Okay, I have Lucas on the line. You there?
Yes, I am. And with the various subjects you touched on, each has their own particular circumstances.
That's true.
For example, with AIG, you had a company that under Maurice Greenberg was rock solid financially. What happened is Elliot Spitzer came along and basically tried to shake down Greenberg, and when he couldn't, he basically put legal pressure on the AIG to get rid of Greenberg. Then Spitzer put one of his buddies in charge of AIG. Now, the important thing here, why AIG ended up, we have to put over nearly $200 billion into AIG, was Maurice Greenberg wouldn't touch mortgage derivatives. The guy who replaced him, because Spitzer and part of the deal forced AIG to put an undervalued revised financial statement, which has since been proven to be grossly undervalued, which started destroying the AIG's credit rating.
Well, let me just lay down there. Let's do this. Leaving Spitzer out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Explain, and I understand what you're saying, the addition of these derivatives, how that affected things.
Yeah, that's what's basically sunk AIG, was the mortgage derivatives.
And what is a mortgage derivative for people who are listening to this?
Well, to an extent, you had under the Community Redevelopment Act, banks were strong-armed into making subprime loans, basically what used to be covered in land contracts. Well, what it is basically a lot of people who didn't have good credit rating or had no credit rating were basically able to go in and get a loan from banks. Basically, this was to invest in property in less than prime real estate markets. What happened is banks that used to say you have to be able to put 10, 20% down, they couldn't do that anymore. So you had basically people buying into properties with no money down. And once the real estate bubble burst, all of a sudden these loans became almost worthless because you had a lot of money put into properties that were maybe not worth half of what the face value of the loans were.
Okay. And what you're saying is that the new person at AIG who replaced Greenberg was willing to engage in the business of investing in derivatives, whereas his predecessor was not. Correct?
Yes. Greenberg would never touch mortgage-backed properties. The new guy at that time, when he came in, mortgage derivatives looked like they were the hottest thing because this was basically the banks packaging these loans and basically selling them in blocks as sort of investment vehicles. And he went all in on them. And the thing is when the real estate bubble burst and everything started falling apart, AIG was stuck with a ton of basically, at least as far as being traded right now, worthless paper.
Well, so but as far as my broader point is concerned, though, even with AIG, the expectation is that they will pay the money back. Now, whether it's realistic or not, for purposes of explaining how the deal appears on paper, AIG owes the money, correct? Mm-hmm. And to the extent that they owe it and are expected to pay it back, this is not a giveaway or a bailout other than...
Not as far as AIG is concerned, but what happened is the reason why so much money had to be given to AIG is the government's been using AIG to launder a lot of money.
Well, what do you mean launder?
Well, basically you
that has kind of a negative connotation to it.
Well, the thing is a lot of people had, put money into AIG. And what happened, in other words, sort of like they invest so much money with AIG and all that, and all of a sudden that investment became worthless. What happened is a lot of the money's been sort of going out coming in AIG and then going right straight out the door to pay off all these people who invested made bad investments. In other words, the AIG put their money here and all that, and this is basically collapsing. And about, let's say, $20 billion has gone to compensate these sovereign investment funds, read Persian Gulf monarchs who've basically been putting their money here, there, and everywhere.
But wasn't that part of the purpose of loaning money to AIG in order for them. I mean, there's nothing illegal about paying the people they owed the money to. That was the very purpose of giving them the money, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. But what it is a lot of others that would have, like a lot of investors that, like Goldman Sachs, that might have had to go the bankruptcy routes and everything else, didn't have to because the money they had placed, to be invested with AIG, they got covered.
Okay, I actually got to end it there, and I appreciate the call, and I'm sure you'll agree with me that Goldman Sachs seems to be able to escape harm like no other for some reason.
It's helpful that you got a lot of Treasury secretaries that seem to keep on coming from Goldman Sachs, and a lot of Federal Reserve people on the Federal Reserve seem to come from out of Goldman Sachs too.
And Lehman Brothers goes by the wayside.
Well, they didn't have enough people at Treasury and at the Federal Reserve.
Okay, well, thanks very much for the call.
You're welcome.
Bye. Bye. That is a popular theory out there that for some reason Goldman Sachs tends to emerge from these things unscathed, while less connected firms do not. We're going to take a quick break for local news and be back after that in just a minute here. And when we come back, we're going to talk, a little bit more about these bailouts in the auto industry as well. And then we're going to talk about the upcoming debates. We're listening to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer right here on News Radio 1290 WMBF Binghamton. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. The phone number to call into the show is 772-1290. We left off talking about the bailouts and specifically AIG. But with respect to the auto industry, the Obama administration is requiring certain restructuring moves by these automakers in order to receive the loans. And again, the intention there, whether it works out or not, is that these companies will become more viable and therefore more able to repay the loans that have been given to them. But there's more to this. And I have been waiting for somebody to make this point for a while, and maybe people have, and I just haven't heard it. A lot of people accused George Bush of taking 9/11 and, running with it, of doing things that he had wanted to do with or without 9/11 and using that as his excuse to go forward and do things like attack Iraq, like certain things domestically that he wanted to do. And I think that people do that when they have the opportunity as president. It's that simple. They see an opportunity to achieve what they had set out to do or what they thought was good for the country before anything happened. And then something like 9/11 comes along, and they see a window where the public and the Congress is going to cooperate with them, and they seize that. I don't really see much difference between that and what is going on right now with the reshaping of the auto industry, the reshaping soon of the healthcare industry, the reshaping of the banking industry. A lot of the things that the Obama administration is doing were things that Democrats had wanted to do for years. Now they have an opportunity. And I don't think it's any less exploitive than when George Bush was president and he embarked on his policies. I mean, the things that are being contemplated right now will last for generations. You are talking about, in the case of the banking industry, completely rewriting the rules. In the case of the auto industry, 1,100 GM dealerships are going. They are to be no more. That isn't theoretical. That's in our local paper today. Pontiac is gone. And this doesn't even begin to address healthcare. When I used to kind of resent the fact that everything became about security after 9/11. A tax cut was described as economic security. Well, that's garbage. As is reforming healthcare in order to revamp our economy. When you extend healthcare because you believe it's a moral obligation, then fine. But it is not a crucial part of stabilizing the economy, other than to take it off the backs of businesses, which make us less competitive. But all these things that we are doing in the name of fixing the economy, they're ambitious to say the least, and are deserving of a greater debate than they will get before they are passed. These are institutional, fundamental, philosophical changes, profoundly so. And just as we should not have rushed into a war, we should not be considering, I take that back. We should be considering, much more so than we are, what we are about to do, and to some extent what we have already done. These are massive changes in the way the United States of America literally does business. Massive. With implications for decades to come. And we read about them in the past tense. This is what Congress did yesterday. Where were the days and months of hearings? Where were the public hearings? Where were the town hall meetings? Where was the input from Americans beyond, I understand the whole representative democracy aspect of this, and we're represented by our representatives. But for change on this scale, there should be more, much more. I'm not opposed to some of this in theory, but that's all it is theory, and it goes from theory to law without us knowing what it is. And once you operate that way, you open yourself up to both sides screaming, characterizing rather than explaining. How many times have you heard before today the interest rate on the loans that were part of these bailouts? I suspect not as many times as you've heard them referred to as giveaways. When you're in charge, you have a responsibility to explain, particularly with issues of this magnitude. This show is dedicated to explaining the issues. I'm sure you've heard the phrase that certain people or certain arguments bring more heat than light. We're going to bring the light on this show, or try to. But having an inflamed public when you could have an educated public. It's a disgrace. It shouldn't be. The American public should know what's going on, and there should be a concerted effort to educate them fairly about the issues, to the extent that's possible. Now, it is not possible to be completely fair at all times. It's impossible. But there's nothing wrong with trying. And you should, at a minimum, as an American, look around for a decent source of information and require it of the people who are disseminating it. And I don't mean networks. I mean, everybody has an agenda. In fact, a study came out recently which I find just fascinating. I think this is great. Of the major news outlets, CNN is considered to be the least biased. And among those outlets that were scrutinized, when it came to viewership, CNN came in last. What does that tell you about this whole notion that America craves an unbiased news outlet? It's a myth. It's not true. They look for their opinion. They look for where their opinion is likely to be reiterated. It's gotten to that point. And that is why I have this show, and that is why the You Defend It debate series pilot will be filmed. We will come back, and I will give you an update on the debate. It's been moved just a little bit, but for a darn good reason, and I'll tell you all about it in just a couple minutes. You're listening to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer on News Radio 1290 WNBF. Welcome back to You Defend It with Rob Kilmer. All right, the You Defend It debate series begins. It looks like it will be July. Well, it will be July. And the reason for that is that the second debater cannot make it end of June. And I'm waiting to hear back which dates he can make it in July. He's indicated his willingness to participate. And man, I couldn't be happier. His name is Erwin Chemerinsky, and he is the Dean of the University of California, Irvine Law School. He has written extensively and been outspoken for a long time on the living, breathing Constitution, as opposed to the other perspective on this that we are presenting at the debate, which is from Kurt Levy of the Committee for Justice, who believes that interpreting the Constitution in any way other than as it is written constitutes judicial activism. And as you know, we have a vacancy on the Supreme Court right now, so this is the right time for this issue. I wanted to read you a brief article. Last week I talked to you about Kurt Levy. This week I will tell you a little bit. This is from an article, February 19th, the American Bar Association, the ABA Law Journal. This is an article about the UC Irvine Law School. A new law school at the Irvine campus of the University of California doesn't even have any students in attendance yet, but it has tied with the University of Pennsylvania for the final spot in the top 10 list published today by Brian Leader's Law School Rankings, based on the faculty's scholarly impact as measured by citations and academic publications over the past 4 years. Yale Law School, the University of Chicago Law School, and Harvard Law School ranked 1, 2, and 3, respectively. According to an explanation provided by the Law blog, the top 10 ranking didn't even perhaps give full credit to the academic reputation of Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, who is the nation's most cited full-time legal academic, now that Cass Sunstein has joined the Obama administration. I want the nation's most cited full-time legal academic to be one of the 2 debaters at the You Defend It debate series pilot. I'm going to accommodate him any way I can, and I will tell you, he writes very nice emails, and when you call his office, it's about the most pleasant experience of your entire day. So that is the lineup right now, tentatively, unless somebody can't make it. It will be Kurt Levy and Dean Chemerinsky. And I think these are the perfect people to have for this. And what you will see that night is a substantive debate with a judge presiding over it, asking each person questions. They will not be asked the same questions, by the way. There would be no reason to. They have different beliefs. And the purpose and what makes my debates completely different from everybody else's is that the entire premise is to flesh out the argument being made by one side. Not allow that person to criticize the other person's argument, but let's have the public understand what they're actually saying. So each person will be asked questions designed to develop their views, to give them an opportunity to explain their views in the context of certain questions. So naturally, they will not be asked the same questions. That wouldn't make any sense, and that is completely different from other debates. They will be given an opportunity, briefly, to respond, far less time than the person who gets the question will have to answer the question. The opponent will have a far briefer period to respond. But the focus will be on really getting the public to understand where that person is coming from. What is it that that person advocates should be the qualities of the next Supreme Court justice? Not what they don't want, what they want. What we're going to get if they get their way, or if the person who is selected is a person who they support. And to me, that's a much more valid approach to debating than just throwing questions out there and having each side criticize the other or make their pre-planned speeches about it. The questions will certainly not be given in advance. Again, it will be at the Waters Theater at SUNY Binghamton, and the topic will be the proper role of the Supreme Court Justice. In other words, should the court interpret the Constitution as written, or is it a living, breathing, evolving document subject to different interpretation depending on the times? It will be filmed during July, and there are some things I'm learning as I go as far as producing something like this, which is, it's interesting. The audience, once I have the date, anybody who wants to come will need to register in advance on my website. One of the things I learned in meetings with the people from SUNY is that they have to know in advance how many people will be there. And it's the only way I can think of to do it. There would be a nominal fee, probably $10 or so for the debate itself. I've already hit the $15,000 mark in promoting this or producing this so far. But there's a cost associated with having an audience. And I hadn't considered that. Although I would invite anybody who listens to this show and anybody who wants to come. I want people there anyway. The audience won't play a role in it other than to be there for the first of what I hope to be hundreds of You Defend It debates. And again, I'm hoping by next week to have the actual date nailed down. This is the nerve-wracking part, trying to coordinate two different people who are very busy, trying to coordinate their schedules around the available dates for the theater itself. Now, for instance, with respect to Mr. Levy, he has made it clear to me that he expects to attend hearings on the Supreme Court nomination, or the Supreme Court nominee, and he won't be leaving those. So I'm going to try and get a weekend date if I can. But he is that involved in the process. Also, I will say this. Both people who I have contacted for this seem genuinely appreciative of the format. In other words, they want to get their position out there. I don't know either one of them, obviously, and I'm not speaking for them. But I suspect that they're a little tired of the noise, too. They believe in what they're doing. They've dedicated their careers to doing it. And have something to say. These are people who can back it up. These are people who can tell you, who can fill in the blanks on what you hear day in, day out, in the form of characterizations and denigrations and, just simple provocation from both sides. These two people can fill in the blanks. They can tell you what's really at stake here. From a constitutional standpoint, from an analytical standpoint, from a how it's going to affect your life standpoint. And that is exactly what I want. I'll be honest, I'm nervous to keep these two people in it. I hope nothing comes up that prevents either one of them, because they are exactly what I had set out to find and what I hope to be putting out there to the public for years to come. This is a pilot that I'm going to take to every network. And I'll tell you what, I plan on having an interesting conversation with CNN. Isn't that amazing? I can't get over that thing with CNN. They are the least popular and the most objective. Oh my gosh, how did it ever get this far? But it's turning out at this point to be everything I wanted so far. Everybody who's involved is exactly who I wanted to be involved, including the judge who's going to preside over this, and the people who are working with me to develop the questions and develop the production itself. This is going to look like a presidential debate. This is not going to look like, something you'd see at a Rotary Club. Not that there's anything wrong with a Rotary Club. But this is going to look like a presidential debate. You would, if presidential candidates' heads were put on top of the bodies, if you were to Photoshop them on there, you'd think you were looking at a presidential debate. That's my goal. And it is to make these debates worthy of the issues and the people whose lives that are affected by them. So far, so good. And again, if you have any suggestions for questions you would like me to ask, we're beyond topic and participants now. Go to my website and let me know. We're going to be talking about some famous Supreme Court cases over the years. We're going to be talking about some current and former justices, I'm sure. But we're going to do so respectfully, and we're going to do so in a way that gets the maximum amount of information out to you. And if you leave there knowing more than when you came, then I will have succeeded at my first debate. But I think it's the way to go. Okay, I will be back next week, and I'll try and give you an update each week on the debates. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to You Defend It right here on News Radio 1290 WMBF Binghamton.